What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're going to talk about the Game Week 13 wildcard. We still have quite a few games to go for Game Week 12 before we start thinking about team selections, transfers, and stuff like that. Although I think a lot of us will be transferring out Leandro Trossard after his blank last night. So I thought, what better time to start looking at the Game Week 13 wildcard? If you've got the chip active, this is the week to use it. I don't really see any reason to delay it any longer. There's only 4 weeks left until we get to the World Cup, so you might as well use it this week. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. I think a lot of the decisions on wildcard kind of pick themselves, but these are some of the decisions when I put together the draft that I think people are going to have to look at. So which 3 Arsenal and which 3 Man City to go for? I've got to be honest, I feel like these pretty much pick themselves. With Man City, I don't see any real reason to go for Kevin De Bruyne at his price. You can get a different premium from another team, either Kane or Salah. We'll come on to that in a minute. And for Man City, you've got Cancelo, who seems to be the only nailed defender. Akanji, I do think will get pretty good minutes, but I think in terms of attacking threat and minutes, Cancelo is the one to get. Foden is just exceptional value. I think he might be the highest scoring midfielder in FPL, or close to it, right? Similar points to De Bruyne, if not more, for a lot less money. So Foden's the one to get in midfield. And of course, you have to have Haaland. So the 3 City, I feel like, kind of pick themselves. And then you've got 3 Arsenal. So for me, it's Martinelli because of the value, and then Saka over Jesus. Now, the reason for that, I'm not saying you can't have all 3, but I think it is kind of difficult to fit them in because the defenders are quite good value. Like Ben White is only 4.5 million. And with Saka, you've got penalties. He's also a midfielder, so there's extra routes to points, like clean sheets, extra point for the goal as well. And he's on penalties. Whereas Jesus is only 1 yellow card away from a suspension. And I just don't know if that's worth the risk on wildcard. Like, if you get him this week, and then for Nottingham Forest at home in Game Week 14, he's suspended, that would be extremely frustrating. You could probably just hold on to him, but then he runs into Chelsea away. So I think I would probably go for a defender instead. That will probably come down to how much money you have to spend on the spot. Someone like Gabriel is quite good from an attacking point of view, but Ben White is very good from a value point of view. Only being 4.5 for an Arsenal defender is pretty good. And the way they've been lined up, I don't see Ben White or Gabriel really losing their place, not before the World Cup, because Arsenal have played so well. I don't know why Arteta would change things up. Kane versus Salah is a little bit tricky. I still think that Salah is probably the best option from now until Game Week 16. Obviously, I am recording this before we've seen most of the Game Week 12 matches. We've only seen the 2 last night, at least at the time of recording. So Palace versus Wolves and Brighton versus Forest. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Salah is the better option. But as we'll come on to, well, we can just do it now. I think forwards are tricky on wildcard. I don't think there's too many that are a really good price with really great fixtures all the way from now until Game Week 16. So Mitrovic, for example, he's not a bad option. Nailed on penalties, talisman, all that good stuff. But he's got Man City away in Game Week 15 and Man United at home in Game Week 16. So is he the ideal one to go for? Possibly not. So when you're looking at it as a combo, Salah plus a forward or Kane versus a midfielder, it maybe gets a little bit tricky because a lot of people are going to have Saka and Foden and Martinelli, but there's still other midfielders that are pretty good. Zaha scored last night. I know he can be frustrating, but since Game Week 9 wildcard, that's now at least 2 attacking returns. I didn't expect 1 against Chelsea anyway, so he's not actually done that bad. I just think our expectations of him are maybe a little bit too high. You've also got Bowen. West Ham have got really good fixtures. So I don't think the case to go Kane is completely closed, but my preference is Salah, as you know. Best goalkeeper, I don't really see any reason to spend a huge amount on this spot. I actually think Pickford might be the best option just because of Everton's fixtures. Like, we can just bring them up here really quickly. They've not exactly been great, and to be fair, expected goals conceded wise, they've not been fantastic at all. It's not a surprise that they've started leaking a few goals recently. But after Newcastle away, it's Palace at home, which isn't too bad, Fulham away and Leicester at home. Sorry, obviously Newcastle away doesn't matter because that's Game Week 12. So from 13 onwards, it's Palace at home, Fulham away, Leicester at home, then Bournemouth away. Now the 2 away games, Fulham and Bournemouth, could I see Mitrovic and Solanke scoring? Possibly. But when it comes down to cheap goalkeepers, I don't know if you can do too much better. Like, if you look at Brentford, for example, and Raya, again, we're looking from 13 onwards. They've got to play Man City away yet. That's not great. The other 3 of their 4 are away. Villa away, Nottingham Forest away. Now, Nottingham Forest are pretty bad. We saw them last night against Brighton. In terms of attacking threat, not great at all. And Brighton probably should have scored as well. But I don't know if I would go there. And as someone that's on Ward and Everson, I'm not really looking to spend transfers on it. But I don't think I would be bringing them in, right? Because, again, 3 of the next 4 are away. Wolves, Everton and West Ham. And the other game is Man City at home. So Leicester defence isn't great. So I think the best goalkeeper is probably Pickford. Trippier, I think most people will keep just because of how consistent he's been and how much money they have tied up in him, and that's fair enough. If you're like me and you only bought him recently, you don't have as much money tied up in him, is there a case to go without? The only thing I would say is the fixtures. So Everton at home this week, obviously you're missing that. Well, you've probably got him, right? So that's a good fixture. Spurs away is going to be tricky. Chelsea at home is going to be tricky as well. So you're kind of, I guess, relying a little bit on 14 and 15. But I do think because of value and stuff that people have got tied up in, they're going to keep him, and that's absolutely fair enough. I don't think that's a bad move at all. The fixtures after the World Cup are pretty good, so as long as he's fit, I'm sure most people are going to keep him in. I've already done the Salah and forward thing. Cancelo versus Trent. Look, right now, if you're watching this before the games are played on Wednesday, you're shouting at me, definitely Cancelo. But if Trent starts, and we see the Trent and Liverpool of old, maybe there's a conversation to be had here, and maybe then you could put that money somewhere else. But I think ultimately Cancelo is probably the one that I would go for. And then the differential thing, because a lot of people, if they're wildcard, and especially if the rank isn't too good, they'll be thinking about differentials. I don't think you need to. Like, if I look at what the wildcard team is going to look like, which we'll come on to in a minute, versus what my team looks like right now, like, I don't have Saka and Foden. I can only get one in. If I want both, it's going to take a hit. I don't have that third Arsenal defender, although maybe that's not such a bad thing. It doesn't really matter. I've got Leicester goalkeepers at a time when they're not going to be quite as good. I'm saying, is there a lack of forwards? And I've got Mitrovic and Solanke in my team. So when I think about the wildcard team that I've put together, for me, that is just differential enough that hopefully you've done okay over the last few weeks versus Game Week 8 and Game Week 9 wildcarders. And now you can just have, hopefully, on paper, the best team from 13 to 16. There's maybe one or two differentials you can fit in, but I don't think there's a massive need for it. So that's the key decisions. But for me, most of them kind of pick themselves. Let me know if you think differently in the comments below. Okay, so this is the first draft that I've come up with. What I will say is it's quite a quick turnaround until the Game Week 13 deadline. That is on Saturday, so you might want to make a few changes to this. I'm probably not going to have time to go through more drafts after this. I might take a few questions for the Game Week preview, but obviously you can just use this as a bit of a guide. So we'll come onto the bench in a sec. In goal, I've gone for Pickford. I don't really see any reason to put Danny Ward on your bench, because obviously if Pickford misses out, Begovic will be the keeper that comes in for you, and I don't see any way over the next 4 game weeks that we're gonna want at least 2 Everton outfield players, so it doesn't really block you from doing that. So that's probably the combination that I would go with, and I'm playing 4 at the back this week, but I do have Solanke on the bench now. Whether or not Solanke is better than Mitrovic, that's a bit of a tough decision, but there is quite a big price difference, and I don't think Bournemouth's fixtures are that bad. This week it's West Ham away, they've also got Spurs at home, which is maybe not ideal, but then it's Leeds and Everton, and I think for 5.8 million, you can just play him if you need to. I don't think it's that bad. He's a little bit of an enabler for the rest of the squad, and if you want to bench him this week, you could just play your West Ham and Arsenal defender. So I've gone for Ben White and Zuma. Obviously, we'll have to keep an eye on Zuma and whether or not he's fit and ready to play and stuff like that. That might be one position you need to change, but if he is fit, he's pretty much nailed on for West Ham, and they've got some pretty good fixtures to come. So if we just take a look at, obviously at this point we're really only looking at the next 4 weeks. Do not worry about Game Week 17 onwards. Man United away is their most tricky fixture. Every other one from now until 16 is at home. Bournemouth at home, Palace at home, and Leicester at home. And I do rate the West Ham defence. I think it's pretty decent, so I don't think having Zuma in there is kind of much of a problem. And then the other defender I got on the bench is Anderson for Crystal Palace. I don't know how many clean sheets I expect from Palace, but in terms of cheap defenders, he's a pretty good option. The one that I would be thinking about going for as a punt, especially if you don't need to play him every week, is Doherty, because I think he's going to start against Man United, and it's not guaranteed that he will start against Newcastle, but I think he has basically played himself into being the first choice right wing back for Conte for Spurs. Now that doesn't mean that he's just going to play Premier League games. He might play in the Champions League, and Emerson Royale might get some of the Premier League games, but for 4.6 million, he's probably worth a bit of a punt. So I'd maybe look at swapping Anderson to Doherty or White or Zuma, whichever your kind of preference is. I've gone for Cancelo over Trent. I just like the look of those Man City fixtures. Like, they are really difficult to ignore. I've got him on my team. Brighton at home, Leicester away, another 2 home games against Fulham and Brentford. The way the Man City defend, right, that looks like 2 or 3 possible clean sheets for me. It might not work out like that. This is football, this is FPL, but they look pretty decent. I've got Trent and Cancelo, but you have to make quite a few other sacrifices to get that, and I think if I was on a wildcard, I just wouldn't bother with that. I would just take that money out of defence. And if I had to have one, look, Trent might change my mind today when he plays, but I'm not sure that's going to happen. So I'm probably just going to go for Cancelo, right? I think Cancelo will be the one. And I put Trippier in there because I don't think most people are going to entertain the idea of dropping him. So surprise, surprise, I have picked Mo Salah as my second premium in midfield instead of going for Harry Kane up front. I'll come on to the forwards in a minute. I think it's going to be interesting. I'm not sure it's quite what you're expecting. And I just think from 13 to 16, Salah will score more points. To be honest, at the end of the day, it probably won't be a massive difference. I wouldn't be surprised if it's only like a 5 to 7 point difference over 4 game weeks, but every little helps, right? And also, some people are still kind of doubting Salah a little bit because he hasn't done that well over the last few weeks. I know he got the goal against Man City. There's maybe some doubts about whether he'll keep starting central, etc. Kane has been super consistent so far this season. And I just think if I'm on a wild card, I want to take advantage of people still thinking like that. They might not do after the West Ham game. We'll have to see how Liverpool and Salah play. But having him as a somewhat differential versus what he's been over the last few seasons against Nottingham Forest, then Leeds at home, that sounds pretty good to me. So I would pick Salah. And like I said, the rest of the midfield kind of picks itself. Foden is such good value for Man City. I think you've got to go for him. I am very torn, and I'll talk about this as I go through my own team in future videos this game week. I'm very torn about whether to get Saka or Foden first of all. But on a wild card, there is no doubt in my mind that I would have both of them. And obviously, Martinelli is exceptional value as well. So we know pretty much now that Saka has penalties. It'll be interesting to see if kind of Martinelli wins one, whether he takes it. But Saka took the last one. Someone else won it, and he still took it. So that looks pretty good. And he's also got a pretty good record for Arsenal. Not such a good one for England, unfortunately. But for Arsenal, he's looked good. So they've got one thing to say, obviously, Arsenal, really quickly. They've got, I don't know why I'm saying really quickly. I'm the one doing the video, right? You're watching it. Hopefully you're enjoying it. They've got Chelsea away in game week 15, which is not ideal, but I think Wolves are there for Arsenal to score a few goals against. This fixture here, I just couldn't go into this fixture without at least 2 Arsenal attackers. You could go for all 3 and have Martinelli, Jesus and Saka, maybe even Odegaard as your third one, if you wanted to go 3 Arsenal midfielders, Martinelli, Odegaard and Saka. That might not be the worst call and play 3-5-2 instead. But I just think Nottingham Forest at home is a fixture where Arsenal could easily score kind of 3 to 5 goals. Just the way that Nottingham Forest have been defending, but also just the way Arsenal have been attacking so far. So I would definitely want them. Like I said, midfield, fairly easy. The only question mark really is whether you definitely want Salah or whether you want to put a 5th midfielder in there as well. So up front, I've gone a little bit different, and I've put Darwin Núñez in there. I'll come on to him in a minute, right? Because obviously, it's not just a conversation about why I've picked him. It's also why I've not picked some of the other forwards that are options too, like Tony and Jesus and Mitrovic. Haaland has to be in there. That one is super obvious. He's going to be most people's captains over the next 4 game weeks. If Salah goes mad against West Ham, which I'm not necessarily expecting, but if that happens, there is then a conversation to be had about captaincy this week and next week as well, possibly, when Haaland's got Leicester away. I know they've been conceding a lot, but Salah has Leeds at home. That's a pretty good fixture. But ultimately, that is why I'd probably have those 2 differentials, because I don't think Kane is going to be part of the captaincy conversation that much over the next 4 game weeks. And just to answer another question that might come up, could you just go for 1 premium? You definitely could, but I wouldn't want to be stuck just in case someone gets injured. Like if Haaland picks up a knock, or if Pep says he's a doubt for 1 game, you don't want to then be scrambling for a captain. Now, to be fair, Foden and Saka have got such good fixtures, apart from maybe Chelsea away for Arsenal in 15, that if you needed to, you could just captain one of them instead. Like, I think in another, maybe not another season, but if Salah and Haaland had slightly trickier fixtures in game week 14 when Saka's got Nottingham Forest at home, maybe he would be part of the captaincy conversation anyway. So I think 1 premium can be viable, but when I look at this team, I don't know if there's a huge amount more money that I need. Like if I took Salah out and went to a different £8 million midfielder like Bowen, for example, for Bournemouth at home, I'd probably then just spend that money on defence, or maybe upgrading Solanke, or possibly just going to Harry Kane. And I've kind of already spoken a lot about Kane versus Salah, so I don't think I would do that, right? So Haaland definitely in. I still want that 2nd premium. Solanke on the bench. You could make a case that Mitrovic is a better option, but you've got to find nearly 1 million to kind of make that happen, right? So I've gone for Darwin Núñez. So let's just talk about some of the players I haven't gone for. Jesus and Tony. They're both 1 yellow card away from suspension. Now, for those of you that have been playing for been playing FPL for a while, you remember the days of Diego Costa at Chelsea. There was a period where he was 1 yellow card away from a suspension. I've talked about this before. Loads of us didn't bring him in, even though he was smashing in the goals every single week, and he carried on doing that. And Diego Costa, you just always expect to get a yellow card, and he went something crazy like 4 to 6 games without getting one, and obviously then the limit goes up to 10. So that can happen. but I just don't think it's necessarily worth the risk. Like, if you go for Jesus, you're going for 3 Arsenal attackers. And look, that looks good for Southampton away, Nottingham Forest at home. Maybe not quite as good for Chelsea away. And if you go for Tony, we'll just have a quick look at his fixtures. I already spoke about them briefly when I talked about Raya. So I think from an attacking point of view, look, you'd love to have Tony against Nottingham Forest away. And Villa and Wolves are not that bad. Man City away, not ideal though. And I just think with Liverpool's fixtures, bearing in mind most other people are not going to do this, like apart from Spurs away, they've got Forest away, Leeds at home and Southampton at home. If Darwin Núñez started all of those games, I think there's a good chance of getting some decent points. Like his underlying numbers, expected goals, expected assists are very, very good. They're actually quite similar to Haaland. Now, I know Haaland's played more minutes. I know that Man City are a better attacking team right now than Liverpool. And I know that from watching Darwin Núñez, he at least from what we've seen from Liverpool, I'm not talking about previous clubs, I haven't watched him enough. He doesn't seem like the best finisher, but you keep getting those chances, as Klopp said, the ball goes back into the net more often than not going forward. So I think there's a bit of a differential, which you don't have to have in your team. I think Darwin Núñez could be worth it. It's not like he's massively more money than Jesus either. Like, I think he's only, is he like 8.8 million? Like, so Jesus is 8 million exactly, and I think Darwin Núñez, I did that very quickly, you probably didn't even follow that. I think Darwin Núñez, yeah, is 8.8 million, so there's only 0.8 in it. And I just think that combination works quite nicely. You could just put Mitrovic in there if you wanted to and put some more money into midfield or defence. You could just have Jesus and get rid of Ben White and go for a different cheap defender. But I just don't see a huge concern with going with Darwin Núñez. We'll see how he plays against West Ham. It is a very quick turnaround for Liverpool from Wednesday to the first game on Saturday, so there is a chance of a bench in there. And I'm not sitting here telling you he's going to start every single one of the next 4 games, but because of all the injuries, I do think he probably gets at least 3 starts for the next 4. I think if he only starts twice, you've been a little bit unlucky. He's always going to come on, so there is a chance for points off the bench. But if you do think he only starts 1 or 2 of the next 4, I probably wouldn't go for him. I just think the rest of the team looks so solid. There's no planned transfers here either, so you can adapt to what happens over the next few weeks. Like, you're almost certainly just going to roll a transfer into game week 14, and I think that looks pretty good. I know some of you are going to hate the Darwin Núñez pick, so let me know below, if you don't pick him, which forward are you going for? Almost certainly a cheaper one, and how are you going to spend that money? You could maybe downgrade Cancelo to a really cheap defender and just have Harry Kane, Haaland and Salah, but for me it's just not worth the sacrifice. So let me know what you think about that draft in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.